Hello and welcome to the Midnight Cable. I'm Gimon.
And I'm Brandon.
In this show, we talk about anime we watched recently. However, we are not just spotlighting the newest shows out there. We'll also be covering old titles from 1 year ago and beyond.
This is because we believe it's a good balance to discuss new ones that are currently hot topics, but also old ones that people may have either overlooked or forgotten about.
Which is why most of our episodes will be double features. While we intend to cover bigger series eventually, for the beginning we'll be focusing on shorter 12 to 14 episode series. This week we watched two titles, Spectre and Beautiful Bones, Sakurako's Investigation. Spectre is a supernatural mystery show with the central focus on a loli girl named Kotoko Iwanaga, the so-called goddess of wisdom, who serves yokai and other supernatural beings. She is assisted by her boyfriend Kuro Sakuragawa, who she quickly finds out is anything but human. Together, they solve mysteries dealing with Japanese mythology and urban legends. They also come across a traffic police officer, Saki Umihara, and Kuro's former fiancée, who gets involved in a case they're investigating, which poses a threat to the people in the city. So, Brandon, what did you think of Spectre?
Well, Giman, it was a very boring anime and I didn't like it. I came into it with really high expectation because people have been constantly reminding me that it's similar to Monogatari series.
Which you're a huge fan of
course, and Bunny Girl Senpai, those shows that has very long dialogue and unique character interaction, interesting topics to talk about.
And visuals.
Of course. This show has a lot of interesting premise, and it has a lot of potential, but the execution was just so wrong, and it ended up to being a huge disappointment.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel as well. I mean, I kind of expected it to be more, case per episode, with a much darker tone considering it deals with the theme of supernatural. But the way, the show builds up, its plot, which only focuses on, just, one main plot, takes so much time that it just doesn't feel satisfying at all. That's all interesting stuff, happens, way late into the show. And it just feels like a complete waste of time. And the only thing it just, really let me feel was a very nasty throbbing headache.
Yeah, it was unbearably boring.
The synopsis we gave you earlier is a bit misleading, as the anime only covers 2 arcs from the original source material, with the case of Steel Lady Nanase taking approximately 10 episodes of the entire run.
The story covers how Kotoko and Kuro met, and after the first 3 episodes, it flashes forward 2 years into the main arc. It deals with a ghost of a recently deceased idol singer coming back as a ghost, attacking people with a steel beam she's carrying.
These problems are only made worse due to the lack of any interesting characters, but we'll be discussing it further once we get to the actual main cast.
Most of the episodes in this anime can be summed up to seeing the people talking in a hotel room with some bit of comedy, seeing the people talking in a family restaurant, and occasionally you get brief action scene thrown in between.
Yeah, and even those action scenes, are extremely brief and only appear, slightly at the beginning, slightly in the middle, and towards the end. But most of the time, all episodes are just talking and nothing actually interesting, just building up to the actual interesting stuff way towards the end, like in the 3 episodes preceding the finale. The character designs are serviceable, but hardly anything special. While some manage to stand out, such as Saki, the most we can really say about them is that they fit the setting of the story.
The setting itself is also nothing new, a Tokyo-like town of Makurazaka. While the first 3 episodes take place in different locations, the main plot takes place in the former. There are only 3 main characters that is worth talking about in this show, and 2 major side ones.
Yeah, and the rest are basically yokai that don't have any names or something to distinguish them from everyone else. They mainly serve for plot progression and for some really unfunny comic relief.
The design of them is really good though.
Yeah, I do admit that they did make them faithful to the actual Japanese mythology instead of making them overly cute, which with the show itself, actually lampshades at one point that
Yeah.
how they're usually portrayed in the media.
I agree.
Yeah.
When Kotoko was little, she was adopted by the yokai for 2 weeks. They requested her to become their goddess of wisdom, an offer she naively accepted. When she was found and taken to a hospital, her left leg and right eye were missing, taken as form of payment.
Ever since then, she has served as a mediator between human and the spirit world. All the yokai came seeking her advice in providing a solution to their problems. She eventually encountered Kuro, who became both her boyfriend and assistant.
I think Kotoko is the only interesting character in this show. Her character design is quite unique. She's a loli that has one eye and one leg. Not the typical loli character you often find in other anime. She's really smart, which is really befitting for her position as the goddess of wisdom. And I enjoyed some certain scene with her.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that she might be cute to some, considering many clips on YouTube, with her, seeing, adding up to hundreds of thousands. But I just don't see the appeal at all, and I think she's very obnoxious at times, uh, and 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 she's really not that much more than just a excuse for exposition. I mean, Kotoko has the most dialogue in the show. 70 to 90% of the episodes are her analysis of the topic characters are discussing.
あれによってまとめサイトにつながりやすい時間帯です。
While the show attempts to inject her personality with her being a clingy jealous girl, she still comes across as little more than a tool for exposition.
Kotoko and Kuro have no believable chemistry between them. She basically forced him to be her boyfriend just after getting rejected, and even patiently waited for either him or Saki to enter a relationship before approaching him, like some kind of stalker.
She certainly doesn't have understanding of relationship or compassion of ordinary people, considering she constantly abuses her, status as, just to bully and scare Saki to her wits.
Saki was formerly engaged to Kuro, but broke it off after discovering that he wasn't as normal as she thought he was. 2 years after leaving him, she had found a job as a traffic cop in Makurakasa, unable to eat anything resembling meat due to her trauma involving yokai and Kuro showing signs of depression.
When the rumors about Steel Lady Nanase are reaching her division, she encounters Kotoko battling against the rumored ghost. She decides to join her and Kuro in solving the case, determined to overcome her fear of the supernatural.
I think Saki is the most interesting character in my opinion. I mean, not only does she have, quite unique design, I mean, she's a mature woman, and unlike, everyone else in the show, she actually acts like a human being, considering how scared she is of the supernatural. I mean, if I was her position and I would just suddenly see a freaking cat floating through the window towards me, I would think I would shit my pants.
Okay, your comment might be a bit true, but then again, I totally disagree on her being an interesting character. I think Saki is only here to serve as little more than just exposition for the plot. Her entire character is tied to her past relationship with Kuro. She adds nothing to his character, nor does she make herself more interesting. Her contribution to the plot progression is minimal at best. For almost the entire remaining half of the story, she's merely a spectator, with occasionally commenting on the event unfolding.
これで説明がつく。打てばいいってものなの？
Kuro is the main protagonist alongside Kotoko and became her boyfriend shortly after Saki left him.
As a young boy, he gained immortality and numbness to pain by consuming the flesh of yokai as part of his family's experiments. He also has the abilities to see into the future, but only upon the experience of death.
As opposed to Kotoko, he serves as man of action. He engages yokai by exploiting his invulnerability, as well as fear he causes when they see him, as he appears to them as an existence more frightening them themselves. It's really hard to me to talk about Kuro as a character, because he has no character.
Yeah, I mean, considering the backstory that the show establishes, you would think that he would at least have some sort of development, like for example that he would try to struggle showing his emotions or something like that. But he's little more than just there to to progress the plot along with his MacGuffin powers.
All more surprising is that his voice actor Mamoru Miyano is well known for voicing a character with a lot of unique personality with his wide vocal range.
ガンダム X や刹那 F 精鋭未来を切り開く I am math scientist. It's so cool. Son of a bitch.
I guess this is technically a culmination of his acting profession. He just went from playing, a Gundam to a sinister high school boy to a math scientist, and now finally a piece of wood.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Kuro himself doesn't really show or state any logical reason why he would want to start dating her. It just happens. Not only that, Kotoko constantly acts possessive of him, not even allowing him to talk, meet, or be cordial to his ex-girlfriend. And the show justifies this behavior because it's funny.
For the most part, I think the soundtrack was mostly okay. It's nothing I haven't heard before. It was serviceable, but at the same time, it was so also ordinary and, not that memorable. Opening visuals are all over the place and has all the overused tropes of every anime opening in existence.
While some parts of the visuals can be seen as foreshadowing, the show's writing and build-up are not interesting enough to make the opening unique in any way.
I really like the ending song and its visual. I don't know how to explain it. I just have this, soft spot for jazz music. It's just sounds so soothing. It sounds so stylish.
Well, I mean, I like jazz music as much as the next guy, but I just found it, too weird. I mean, if this was, any other show, where they would just use visuals that don't really match what the plot is about, but the problem is that the two characters that appear in it are so uninteresting that I don't care about that. It just makes it just weird that this could appear in any other anime. In fact, a much better one. I like it, but it just feels like it's wasted on this, anime. That it's just so fun.
So we will be talking about the major plot points starting from this point on. So for people who plan to watch this anime, spoiler alert.
Yeah, although I'm kind of hoping that we would spoil this so we can spare them the headache. But I digress. Kuro's backstory involves, him, being part of this, family that fed over the years, these two different kinds of, yokai meat, with the goal of, giving power to grasp the future. And unlike what we said before, Kuro was not the only one who happened to survive that tragic event. The other one was, his cousin called Rikka, a mysterious woman who has stayed in the hospital for most of her life, having a very disturbing, visions of her, and according to Kuro, for the last year, for the most of her life, she has, tried to find a way to, to kill herself many times.
Which is quite in one of her efforts to try to kill herself, or as the show explained it to us that she's tried to return to be normal, she created this fictional entity called Still Lady Nanase to try to carry out the deed. So basically, Still Lady Nanase is a tulpa like Candyman and Freddie Mercury.
No.
Sorry, Freddy Krueger.
Freddy Krueger.
anyway. So basically, she's a monster of imagination. She doesn't really have an interesting backstory. Karin Nanase as a character doesn't have much to add to make Still Lady Nanase interesting.
I mean, I understand that the show is not really about the investigation or uncovering a mystery, when it's more about the fact that you creating a narrative by using, facts and providing alternate explanations, how things could have transpired. I mean, this is demonstrated early on in the first 3 episodes, with the mini arc with the snake, where there isn't given a straight answer that which one of the possible solutions that Kotoko presented to the snake god is the real one. But I think compared to the Steel Lady Nanase arc, it's actually the most interesting one, because it's up to our own interpretation, which one of them could be correct. But with Steel Lady Nanase case, instead of providing alternate solutions that providing our own conclusions, we already know exactly what transpired, and even before the last few episodes, and yet we are supposed to care at the end that when Kotoko starts listing, all 4 different possible theories that how things could have gotten when we already know the truth. I mean, I know she's trying to stop Rikka by providing this explanations that could explain why Steel Lady Nanase is not a ghost, thus not giving her any power, over her, and thus making her not exist. But it's just so hard to care about, since we already know about Steel Lady Nanase. Not to mention, just like Kuro, Rikka doesn't really have any real character. I mean, she only has 3 lines in the entire show.
いい人ね、クロ。クロ、この子は良くないと思う。人を襲うという属性なら、生きた妹が報復に来なくとも、亡霊の妹が襲いに来ると思わないか?
And all of this is happening while the audience is drowned with exposition and long ass talk with uninteresting action scenes, and Saki constantly having to remind us that what we are experiencing isn't the truth.
It's just an attempt by the show to distract us, from how uninteresting, the things are.
I would say main villain of the show is the internet.
Yeah, I mean...
And basically, we are shown that, Kotoko can interact with the internet normally and, give, really sound explanation to them without even at any point getting trolled or, getting shit posts.
Well, there's that one point when, when she presented her first theory, she was literally told that, too long didn't read fast, and that made me laugh out loud. And I think, it would have actually been funny and more interesting if they tried to make, post more realistic like that. But that's the only thing that sounds like what a person, on image boards like that would post. Like, I mean, after all, Kotoko posting long-winded explanations, that's exactly what I would say, TLDR.
Yeah.
Why could there be like cool story, bro, or something like that? But instead it's just people just talking like everyday normal people, even though people don't write that like online, like clean text, of explanations. Not to mention the people that we are shown throughout the montage of Kotoko discussing with them are shown to be a bit too everyday people. I mean, I'm not saying that everyone are the ones who are staying at home and everything, but some of them are shown to be like people with jobs. I mean, there's this one scene with one guy who is sitting on his desk on a job and while posting on his phone with one hand, like
not your typical 2chan or 4chan shit poster.
So I guess you're all wondering, is there anything that we even liked about Inspector? Well, besides the premise, which we thought had good potential, when it comes to individual good things that we liked, I had to admit it, but I think my favorite moment was I think it was episode 4, where we are introduced to Nanase Karin's backstory, and how there is this sequence where she showcases a music video.
Yes, she has suddenly an anime opening out of nowhere. I would like to watch that anime. a magical girl with a flamethrower, that would be a very enjoyable anime to watch, much more so than this entire show.
Yeah.
Yeah. The best part for this anime, to me, was when it all over.
Yeah, and we were kind of glad that when it was over. But here's the thing, like we have mentioned, the absolute worst thing about this anime is that it just didn't stimulate us in any way.
You can make a bad anime work if you make it enjoyable. You can have those type of bad but good anime, and it still will make the audience feel more engaged in watching. The worst type of scene you can make in an anime is to make it boring.
Yeah, I mean, even the worst types of shows we have seen, stimulate us in some way. It can make us feel enraged. It can make us, laugh out loud, or something like that. But this Inspector just sucked the life out of us, and we just expected it to be over by the time we were in the last 3 episodes.
Because of that, we end up feeling like empty, hollow corpses waiting to be inspected.
That's deep, man.
Beautiful Bones is a case per episode murder mystery. The Holmes and Watson of this story are Sakurako Kujo, a woman in her mid-20s with a passion for osteology, and her assistant Sotaro Tatewaki, a boy attending high school and a close friend of hers. Whenever they are together, they always seem to encounter a human corpse reduced to a mere skeleton, much to Sakurako's fascination and lead to investigate. They also interact with the local people and law enforcement, as that and how everyone deals with it is a question that is always present in every case they take part of. So, what did you think about Beautiful Bones?
I think it might be one of the most surprisingly good anime I've seen. When we first started watching it, I thought that it cannot be at least as bad as Inspector, and would most likely at least lived up to to the praise that people had given it. But once we finished it, I realized that it was so much more than than I gave it credit for, and I'm kind of glad that I paid much more attention to it.
It was just such a above average show at best. There was nothing unique or interesting about the premise. What surprisingly though for me is, like you said, after watching an enduring Inspector which has zero character, Beautiful Bones was like a breeze of summer wind.
Yeah, it definitely washed away that throbbing headache I got after the last show we watched.
As stated before, each episode has its own story. However, there is also an overarching character arc between Sakurako and Shotaro and the relationship between them.
Sotaro struggles figuring out what Sakurako is to him, a friend or something more. This is made more difficult as he is aware of her engagement to another person.
He serves as a sort of connection for her to the living, as she tends to get too lost in her obsession studying the deceased, having difficulty of opening herself up to him and others.
I find that the basic episode structure of this show is kind of generic. It usually started with side character or Shotaro running into situations for the first half of the episode, and then it cut into the later half of the episode focusing on Sakurako-san just solving the case. And every single episode is just like that. The show does indeed have some sort of pacing issue, but I think they managed to remedy the problem by having interesting character. For the most part, every single episode focusing on improving those characters and have them play a large role in the main overall arching plotline.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most impressive thing about the episodes is that even though they are, like you said, basically formulaic, even though there are some exceptions, but the continuity and the development of all the characters between each of them is quite stunning. I mean, usually when in shorter series like this, when case per episode is solved, it's never talked about again or referenced, but even that one middle episode where they're at the festival and it's mostly the side characters, and not the main characters mostly, it still plays a large part, in later episodes in development.
None of these episodes feel like they are filler or time wasting or pointless. I think that each character, minor one included, has distant charm to them, and every single episode that has them is enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it kind of funny that even a small character like that, comic relief police officer has more personality and charm than any of the characters in Spectre combined.
I agree. Sakurako lives by herself with a housekeeper in a large mansion. She has a hobby of collecting animal bones and then reconstructing them. She, however, finds human remains much more intriguing. She learned the art of osteology from her uncle, who formerly served as a forensic scientist, helping the police with unsolved homicides.
Early on, it's implied that Shotaro reminds her of someone quite similar whom she was close to, which is why most of the time she only calls him boy, only call him by his name when worried about his safety.
I think, her design, is actually quite dignified and unique. I mean, compared to some other shows, with a similar type of character design like her, long black hair, large chest to emphasize, how attractive she is. The design is actually quite restrained, and she genuinely beautiful to look at.
Unlike a certain non-character in Spectre. Anyway, I like Sakurako too as a character. At times she can be a little bit too perfect at solving case. She can solve most cases just by observing the bones and just by looking at the environment surrounding the crime scene, which can be a little bit too Mary Sue-ish because, there's no flaw in her logical thinking and mystery solving capability. But I think it make up for it by giving her the flaw of not being able to interact well with other people because of her, relationship growing up only surrounding with bones.
Yeah, I mean, that's what made her, so interesting contrast, to Shotaro, that how Shotaro, who is connected to the living and has, empathy, she's so, focused on, with her obsession with bones that intrigue her, that she really doesn't know how to interact with the people around her. And, to be honest, every time, I saw, interesting, character traits like that and flaws, like in Sakurako, I was like, wow, is this what, a good written character is like? Is like, where was this, when we was in Spectre?
Shotaro came across Sakurako by chance in the past, and after some misunderstandings, became her friend and assistant, though is often frustrated for her refusing to call him by his name.
He tends to refer to himself as her caretaker and is the one to keep her in check when she goes a little bit overboard and becomes tempted to steal human remains for herself. In essence, he serves as her opposite, having empathy and compassion for the living, which often makes him miss critical details in the cases they're trying to solve.
I think he is a rather bland and boring character. There's nothing about him that would stand out from the entire cast, but on the other hand, I do find that his relationship with Sakurako is very unique and interesting.
While Shotaro, might, take some time, to develop his character, we thankfully have, a very diverse and colorful cast of characters that provide charm into this otherwise, quite bleak show.
There's this friendly comic relief police officer that, usually in this type of show just appear as, one-off every time and now then character that has no development. But surprisingly, he has a way more developed personality and, character than we might have expected.
Yeah, I mean, he might be, silly, but he has, compassion and, and he's not afraid to, to take initiative, when it's, necessary. And I don't know. I know it's kind of weird. For some reason, he kind of reminded me of Adachi from Persona 4, at least in terms of silliness like that. Although out of all the side characters, I think the teacher was my absolute favorite.
I agree. He has the most fascinating backstory and his way of thinking, the way that he talk and the way that he interact with these other character.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my favorite moments of his, was, in a sort of a light-hearted episode where, he's talking to Shotaro's classmate about the nature of suicide and how that does anyone have the right to, to interfere with the person's choice to end their own life, Is it a moral obligation or is it wrong to go against their person's wishes like that, and how, and for the first time compared to previous episodes, he showcases a rather cynical personality, but the following episodes we actually get more added to his character, and instead of just exposition in exactly what his character is in just one episode, we are slowly revealed, and it kind of builds up to a nice good climax, towards some of the final episodes.
I think many of the supporting cast does eventually get the chance to shine as much as equally during the entire run. Unfortunately, I think they are also at the same time overshadowed too much by Sakurako. So
everyone else is there just to assist her, but at the end of the day, she's the one who just provides the solution. Everyone else just, are there to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, I would have loved it more if there is just focus on the side character. No Sakurako, just side character solving a case together. That would have been interesting. And
well, there was almost one at the middle, but Sakurako kind of shows up at the end and just basically kind of well, I don't want to say she ruins it, but it could have had much more interesting if she would have make a small cameo at the end, but she just shows up just to solve the case that the side characters couldn't solve on their own.
Yeah,
the continuities between each episode, is not overly repeated, like it must have been that time he experienced that, like flashback, or telling to the audience that it instead the show just showcases like how things are, and it kind of rewards the viewer if they actually pay close attention to the way the characters behave, and it relates to the previous episodes you've seen, and I kind of wish that more shows that we watch would be like this, that they wouldn't just repeat as if the viewers have the attention span of idiots.
I find the opening and ending song to be above average at best. But there is, something interesting about the visual in the way of their, teasing of the story that make up for the most of it. It just feels so interesting to me. The music in this show, at times can be really good.
Yeah, I think my favorite, musical piece, is in the often used, the sequence when Sakurako begins her investigation and utters her catchphrase. And I think it's a very beautiful song to listen to. I mean, some might complain about the fact that it might be a bit overused, but I think it's more of a problem at the beginning, and sometimes the show knows how to shorten it, and the more we go towards the final episodes, it's used a bit more sparingly, and to be honest, the visuals and the music we see each time are so good to look at that I don't exactly find it really that bad of a thing.
I think this might be one of those overlooked soundtracks. I would compare it to Monogatari series in terms of the soundtrack quality.
Yeah, in fact, when I looked, online, about the soundtrack to this anime, because whenever I hear something that I really like, I kind of want to listen to them out of context. But surprisingly, outside of opening and ending song, I only found out the musical piece that I mentioned, and there's only one video about it. But when it came to other background music used throughout the show, there really wasn't any available. It's like even the smallest shows have on YouTube, that since internet has a huge database, so it's kind of weird that nobody would catalog music from this, since it definitely has better music than some of the bigger shows that we've
I think
seen.
the main problem is that I believe that there is such soundtrack out there, but the reason why it's not available on YouTube is just simply the reason why this show isn't talked about it too much, and I think that's the problem of this show, that isn't talked about too much. It's quite underrated.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's due to the fact that due to the formulaic nature of the show, and case per episode, that some people might not give it a bit too much, not enough chance, that pay much more attention to it. That, I mean, I don't know how to explain it. It's more about the fact that the people who have watched it once and then forgotten about it, either because they didn't pay much attention to it or that it just wasn't their cup of tea. But I think it was actually a good thing that we watched this after Inspector, because if we would have watched this first, we probably wouldn't have paid as much attention to the music and all the other details, and we would have just said that it was okay. But when we paid attention to it more, so that we can see all the good points and all the bad things, we actually discovered so much more. And I kind of realized that maybe that's the problem, is that people had seen so many smaller series like this that they didn't even want to give it a chance, and they just dismissed it.
So we previously mentioned about how unique Sakurako and Sotaro relationship is like in this anime.
Spoilers, by the way, we really highly encourage you to watch this on your own. So if you want to avoid spoilers, please skip ahead.
Okay. All right. With that being said, Sotaro name is just one letter away from Sakurako deceased brother's name, Sotaro. And throughout the show, Sakurako expressed the fear for Sotaro lies, because he is too involved with her in her investigation, and it creates this situation where he can be in danger. And we really see that he did get hurt in episode 11, where he gets stabbed.
But yeah, and even before that, it's already, like at the beginning, like in episode 2, where he comes close to, to being injured when he protects Sakurako. And while Sakurako usually, calls him boy, much to his chagrin, for the first time, she actually calls him by his real name, Shotaro, instead of, just boy, or as in Japanese it's called shonen.
I mean, he's more like, the lifeline of Sakurako, her only connection to the human world. She's way too absorbed into studying of death. Because she's traumatized by the death of her brother. She's afraid of getting close to people, thinking that, getting this meaningful attachment to people, and eventually seeing them get hurt would be too much to bear for her. So seeing that, this interaction between the character, is breath of fresh air, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, during the final episodes, I think, the show kind of builds up into a good resolution between them, that while throughout the episodes there is a sort of a drama in terms of Shotaro having difficulty of understanding the intentions and thought process of Sakurako, but it's only the final episodes where they almost, come close to breaking apart, but eventually come together and are able to reconnect like that. And I think that was a sort of a satisfying resolution.
And while we did say that it is spoiler, but we won't be spoiling anything more. We encourage you to watch it and find it out for yourself.
Yeah, this is one of those shows that you have to experience it yourself, and we wouldn't want to take it away from you and have it experience yourself instead of us explain how we felt, because it just wouldn't be the same.
And especially pay really close attention to the tiny detail in our character behavior, moment in this show. they can't be so rewarding to watch.
Yeah, I guess one example that I can give you, you can, let's see you try, to find out other ones. The one I noticed, was in a much later episode where during an investigation where, Sakurako was investigating the disappearance of a girl, and while visiting, her parents' house, her parents, seem to be more focused on maintaining an appearance that instead of showing shame, and how they had some trouble back home, especially her father, while the mother tried to be honest with her, and Sakurako kind of tears into them by saying that what great parents you are, and like that, and says that that you care more about your reputation rather than the safety of your daughter. And what's interesting about that moment was the fact that it was previously established, what exactly had happened to Sakurako's brother, and how her connection to Shotaro, unafraid of losing anyone. So the fact that the show didn't, reiterate or have Shotaro, acknowledge that, wow, this is the first time, I've seen her, acting like that or something like that, that could it be related to something like that, there's none of that. It's just, her acting's a bit out of character that we have seen before, but the show or the characters don't acknowledge it. Instead, the story allows the viewer to discover it on its own. As we said, pay close attention when you watch the shows, because once you have that feeling that you discovered it on your own, it's just such a rewarding feeling.
But of course, this show isn't without any problem. I think the biggest problem with this show, and that for most people would agree with me, is that the ending is really unsatisfying. There was this overarching antagonist that was teased. His presence is, hinted from the very beginning of the show, but the show just ended exactly, in episode 12 without resolving any of that build up and tease.
And basically hinting towards season 2 that never came. But to show's credit and defense, the show at least tried to have a resolution with Sakurako's and Shotaro's relationship, which I think it accomplished just fine. And considering that, unlike in Spectre, which ended on such a note that there's no need for second season, I think the production staff for this anime, obviously had desire to continue the story from there, but they were just never given the chance. And I think it's such a shame, because it would have had, more potential, in terms of character development, especially for other side characters.
I agree. I believe this show is what you would call an underrated gem.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that while this anime was licensed in the United States, it never got a English dub, nor was the light novel ever officially translated. And I do know that this series does have some sort of following, considering that there is an effort online, to unofficially translate the novels into English. I mean, last I checked, they were at volume 6, while in Japan there's like 14 volumes of this. So there definitely was an audience to this, and I mean, this series deserves to be, translated into English.
Yeah, and most definitely this anime deserved a second season, because like we said many times, this show is really good. Well, not technically that really really good.
But it certainly deserved better than this.
Yeah, of course.
So Brandon, I hate beating around the bush, but which one of these two titles that we watched would you recommend?
Well, definitely Beautiful Bone that get our recommendation of watching.
Yeah, there just isn't no contest when it comes to that. And I understand that some people might be interested about Inspector, considering Kotoko is said to be, like Lolly of the 2020 or something like that. I mean, and considering that people seem to have an interest of, various clips on YouTube where Kotoko is acting cute and all like that. But if you just want to see, Kotoko like that, then just watch those clips. I mean, it's not worth it to watch the entire show just for that.
Yeah, it's definitely doesn't feel like a rewarding watch at all. So just if you want to watch it, watch the clip like Kiman said, and also watch that music video with Naren Nanase. It was much interesting than watching the entire show itself. And also definitely watch Beautiful Bones and maybe try to buy the Blu-ray just to promote it, so that we can ask for official release of the light novel to get it translated.
Yeah, some type of effort to somehow show that this show does have an audience, and that we do want the official release.
Yeah, we're sorry that we have to repeat it so many times, but this show is a very, very underlooked and underrated gem.
And it just cannot be overstated enough.
Yeah, and it's never too late for a show like this, for this series like this to get a second season. So please, if you are interested in watching this show, please watch it and then support the official release.
Yeah, if you end up liking it as much as we do, we do encourage that if you have the chance, tell it about everyone else. Maybe by if more people talk about this show, it might eventually get a second season and also official translation.
And that's it for this episode of the Midnight Cable.
Yeah, we hope you enjoyed watching, and we'll see you next time. See you around.
Thank you for watching our first episode. We hope to bring more content for you soon.
Also, don't forget to like and subscribe by clicking the icons on the screen. We also have Twitter and Facebook where you can follow us there to check any of the upcoming content and anything related to our channel.
Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time on another episode of The Midnight Cable.